Hello there and welcome back to the channel. Today, this is the first time that we're going to be running this experiment. Well, it's not an experiment. I truly want to show you many things about music production, but I decided to do it in a much more technical fashion, but at the same time illustrative, and also using the most common language that I could use. Not because I disrespect you, completely the opposite. It's because sometimes it's difficult to understand certain terminology when it comes to the mixing, production of music, and also, well, the whole shebang that happens before we have the chance to enjoy the music that we love so much. So, this is the first installment in this potential series in which I'm gonna be showing you all of the different steps that takes place before the record hits the shelves, so we can learn to appreciate music even further by understanding how it's done and how it's created. So, let's begin. First and foremost, welcome back to Luna, or welcome for the first time to Luna. This is a digital audio workstation. A digital audio workstation stands for a software that is used to produce, record, manipulate, and arrange music, and also, edit as well. And what you do with this, the way to understand how this works, is the following. You will see that you got all sorts of these areas over here. Those are known as audio regions. They could be more than audio, but I will stick to audio because we're going to be talking about mixing. These are known as regions, and this contains the information, the audio files that will produce the sound that we will be working on. This is a session that I produced myself, so we can use it as a way to learn and experiment a bit with the mixing process. So it contains these following instruments. We're going to be dealing with a fully recorded drum track, a bass player or bass guitar. We got guitars, of course it can have guitars on it, and a synthesizer. It's a very, very, very simple arrangement, but it's properly done. You'll see why. Now, what do you do with this? For those of you who have seen something similar to a mixing desk or a mixer, you might be familiar with this. This view over here is what is known as the mixer, of course, obviously. But in here, you can see that we got faders, similar to what the ones that I got over here. I will be able to control them using my controller over here, because let me show you this. If you pay attention to the looks of of the session over here, if I move this fader, see what happens. This surface is actually controlling what's happening on the software. Why am I doing that? It's to make my life easier. I happen to mix quite often and a lot of music, so I found ways to be more hands-on, and we'll be working with these bad boys the entirety of this session. Now, coming back to the whole notion of a digital audio workstation. In here, as I told you before, you load the different audio files that you will be working on, and those are going to be governed by the aforementioned fader. We will be able to apply effects such as compression, distortion, some of those effects that you already might be familiar with if you happen to be somebody who is quite into music. And if you don't know exactly what they do, I will be actually showing you applications of those effects in question, and I'm also going to be explaining to you how to listen to them and what they actually do. Okay? In the context of an actual mix. Now, what else to be explained before we move over to the musical part? I think we have covered everything. So, what we're going to do now, I'm going to press play, and we're going to be listening to the track from start to finish, so we can first get familiar with it. But what we're going to be listening to, it's what is known as a rough mix. A rough mix stands for a mix of the different instruments that were part of the production cycle, or were recorded during the recording sessions as well, that it's not necessarily speaking close to the final. Usually rough mixes happen during that in-between stage, right after the production is over, but right before the mixing process takes place. Why? Because with the rough mix, the producer will guide the mixing engineer on what kind of the aim or the objective for the mix it's meant to be or is aiming for. Okay? So with that being said, let's rock some music. For this, I'm gonna show you a little bit of the inners of the system. I'm not gonna bore you with the jargon or technicalities behind it. Just be mindful of this. When this ball is orange, we're gonna be listening to a rough mix. When it is blue, we will be able to listen to the mix done on the board or over here on our session. Why is that important? It's a reference track, more on that later. For the time being, let's listen to the music and get familiar with what we're going to be dealing with. So, from the top. Okay, a very short musical phrase and following just containing the instruments that I mentioned before. Now, we're going to be using this guy to leave markers that I will use to move across the session. Why is that important? Well, the thing is this, and it's something that I have mentioned before in several of the different music analyses that we have done here in the channel. There are points of interest across the music, across the song. And as a mixer myself, I first have to identify them so I can use those as anchor points or as a way for me to know which parts are the ones that matter the most from an emotional perspective. Okay? So I'm going to be doing that now. I'm going to press play again from the top. And I'm going to be using my tools over here that will allow me to drop some markers. I will explain those once they are there. Here we go, from the top again. Okay, I think that's enough. Now, the markers are over here. These guys, as you can tell by the name alone, they are already called markers. And they are gonna be memory locations of some sorts. Or they're basically speaking markers that will be displayed to me in specific positions across the timeline. How the way that this digital audio workstation works is by, as soon as you press play, this playhead over here is going to move forward. That's why you got this linear kind of like of a presentation of the music. So the song begins here and ends somewhere over here, okay? I will drop an extra marker here at the very beginning. I'm going to press play again just to mark the very starting point. Perfect. Now I'm going to name them. I'm going to call this intro. The next one is going to be guitar. This is where the solo begins. Then the next one is going to be the verse or modulation. Then this is the important one because that's where the timbering happens. And the last one is going to be outro. Perfect. So, naming. Okay. Now I got this out of the way. We will be able to move the playhead across, as you can see, by the press of a button. It's going to be quite useful because that way we can focus our attention when mixing on a particular section of the track. Okay, enough of this. What's the next step? First, we finally understand how a digital audio workstation kind of works in a very simplified fashion. And just as a reminder, it's a software that allows us to manipulate, edit, control, and mangle any form of audio in any shape or way we want. It's basically the way that every single record has been produced for the last at least 25 years. Now, they involve many things, and we'll be exploring them little by little. So at this point, we already have an understanding of what the song sounds like. We're using the rough mix that it's already guiding us, it's already pushing us in a particular direction, but it's not pristine. It's far from sounding like a proper record. It's not punchy, it's not energetic enough. It's a little bit kind of cloudy. It's not as clear as I would like it to be. And it's not necessarily speaking exciting. And that's what my job as a mixing engineer is gonna be about. And it's actually what you should do as a mixing engineer. So let's begin. First step. I like to work in a way that is very similar to what it would be if I were to be mixing on an actual console. Because I learned my way around mixing by working with those consoles back in my early years, and also because I happened to found the whole notion of producing music in the way that the records that I love the most, that sounds the best, were produced. And it happens to be that most of those records were produced during the 80s, before I was even born. So there is something about it, and that means one thing. No computers were involved in the production. Well, not necessarily in the production, because probably there were some computers used in setting certain instruments. Looking at you, Depeche Mode or Peter Gabriel, all of those guys who were very forward-thinking and very, very at the avant-garde. Now, since I like to work as if I were to be working on a mixing desk, I will be using a virtual recreation of a mixing desk. Let me show you. One of the benefits of working with a digital audio workstation or working with music digitally is something that is known as a plugin. Probably if you work on Photoshop or you do any form of editing, video editing or stuff, you might be familiar with the term. But for those of you who are not, a plugin is basically speaking a tiny program that lives and only works inside of a bigger program, a host program. In this case, Luna, which is the one that we're working with. So I will be using plugins to control and manipulate my audio. For example, applying equalization, compression, distortion, applying effects such as delay, reverb, and stuff. The kind of stuff that I try to draw your attention to when we are analyzing music together in the channel. So, but you will be able to see those in action and being applied through an actual mix. Okay, so plugins, I'm going to show you one. Here's the one that we got already inserted. Actually, the one we were rocking here, this guy, this is known as Adapter Metric AV, and this is an actual plugin. In here, I loaded the rough mix, and when I click on this ball, we switch between the mixes, as I explained before, because the plugin is already engaged. I'm going to close this window, and here's the one that we are going to be using. You can tell there is a huge similarity between that guy and the board over here. I gotta fix that camera. It's not necessarily proper, but you get the gist. Now, coming back to the DAW. This guy, it's actually an SSL channel strip. SSL is a very beautiful series of consoles, solid state logic, that have been used in several amazing records, including Peter Gabriel, and many others. I can't remember the rest. Right now, I'm focused on the mix, but you know what I mean. Great sounding desks, fantastic. They have been around since forever, and some of the best records ever produced were worked on those mixers. So we got a digital recreation of it. Is it good? It is great. Is it as good as the real deal? It is not. But it is that good that it's this close from being as good as the real deal. There are many more things that happens in the real world that are, in my opinion, kind of impossible to recreate on the digital realm. But it's very good, to the point of it being mostly the standard, because most mixers or mixing engineers work with plugins now. Okay? Yes, and some of you might be saying, this is the reason why modern music production sucks. I kind of partially agree with that. It is not the plugins. It's the over-reliance on something known as presets. A preset, as the name implies, is a preset series of parameters being moved around and set in a position that you simply load by the click of a button. People have become lazy, and also the plugins are so good that it's easier for somebody just to find a preset that kind of gets the job done, and that's it. There is no personality, no soul, and no effort involved. That's why I partially agree with that. I never use presets. That's basically one of my rules here. Not because I like to make my life harder. It's because I think there is some form of... No, there is very much that is lost when you don't actually have an input over the music that you're working on. Again, presets are not evil, bad. They're there for a reason, which is starting points. Sometimes it can inspire you. That's where they are for. Okay, enough talking. Let's do some mixing. So, this is the plugins we're going to be working with, and I will be using a particular extra layer that is known as 360. If I click here, and then I bring this bad boy here, we got now something that is reminiscent to a mixing desk, isn't it? You got all of the channels properly named and such. So what we're going to be doing is going to be, well, bringing in the sound. So we're going to be starting with this. This is known as gain stage. Gain stage is setting the volume of the audio to a point in which everything in the system that will be used for mixing the song will be working at an optimal stage. No more than that. It's basically the same as what happens when you are feeding an amplifier, and if you send a very hot signal, the amplifier is going to react differently. It's not going to be optimal. You might have some artifacts such as distortion, or you might be getting not enough punch out of your music because you're feeding it incorrectly. So we're going to be using that. That's why it's called gain staging. So let's begin with that. For this, I'm going to bring back my Luna first, and I'm going to also bring in the... no, I think I'm going to do it quickly. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to use one of my markers so we can quickly cycle in one region or one section over here. I think we're going to go for this, the introduction. We're going to be looping back and forth so we can get the sound of my instruments in a cohesive way. So here we go. And I'm going to bring back this guy. Ready? Set. Let's rock and roll. We got a problem here. Let me show you. It seems that the bass is out of sync. Let's fix it. Let's zoom in. Let me first see what could be the problem. Let's play it back again. Okay, maybe. Okay, let's change the snapping function. I'm gonna be a little bit more detailed. So we can move it in smaller increments. And also, I think I'm gonna switch to zoom in. And by the way, the idea for this to be live is for you to ask as many questions as you need. So feel free to do it. So let's see. I'm gonna increase the resolution again, even more. Maybe here. And as you can see, we're already manipulating the audio. We're finding a sweet spot for it, or the right positioning, because something happened during the export. Okay, now that we got the song going, or at least sounding correctly, or not necessarily super balanced, we're gonna be addressing the balance. Very important. What does that mean? As with everything in life, there are elements that are more important than others. There are priorities. And in this case, we have to decide which instrument is the most important. In this case, it's clearly the lead guitar. Why? Because it's the leading voice. Okay, so we're gonna address that first. We're gonna go back to our mixing desk, and in here, I'm gonna redo everything. But first, I'm gonna go back to the marker thing so we can find a spot where the guitar is more prominent. That's why it was very important for me to leave memory spots, or remembering where the markers, where the solo begins, so I can quickly go to the point in which the marker that says solo is, so that way I can create a region, a looping region, so we can let the guitar roll for a while. And with that in mind, this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna go back to the mixer, and I'm gonna take everything down. Once again, why? Because we got the first stage, which was the gain. We set it up correctly, and from here, I'm gonna now use my main instrument, which is my guitar, to be on top of everything, because we're gonna be building the rest of the mix, the rest of the ensemble, or the rest of the orchestration is gonna be around the main instrument. If we're dealing with a singing voice, that would be the case. Okay, let's begin. Here we go. My guitar, lead guitar, perfect. And also there is some weird naming that I will have to address as well. So let's check it out. Here is perfect. Okay, now that the guitar is loud enough, and I also gave myself some headroom on my fader, because if I get too close to this, I will have little to no room to push forward. Also, since we're mixing, our plan is to find a proper volume, not overly loud or quiet. It has to be that sweet spot. There are more technicalities regarding the loudness that we can go on forever discussing them, but it's beyond the scope of this whole live stream. So we got the guitar kinda in a proper position. From here onwards, we're gonna be using this as the foundation for the rest of the track. So I'm going to be pushing faders, looking for the spot for the rest of the instruments in correlation to the guitar, in which the guitar is still on top, but finding itself a nice spot for the rest of within the rest of the music. Okay, here we go. And also, I'm gonna take a look at my software over here so we can make a much bigger area, because that way we can loop back and forth, maybe from this section. The entirety of this area is gonna be looped back and forth. Here we go. Okay, not necessarily awful, bad. I think it has plenty of room for improvement, so let's work on it. But first, I gotta address this, because for whatever reason the project loaded with weird naming. So I'm gonna readdress them briefly. That's my kick, that's my snare. These are my toms. Tom 1, Tom 2, Tom 3. Then we got the hi-hats. Then we got the overheads, stereo. Then we got the overheads, mono. Also my room microphones, stereo. And the perks, which is the tambourine. Perfect. And yes, now I can read correctly. Also, this is supposed to be bass amp. There it is. Easy, perfect. Now I know exactly what I'm dealing with. Good. Now, let's go back again to our gain staging or our faders, but I realized that I did something very dumb. I loop or create this area in which the song is cycling back and forth without the guitar that I'm using as a reference point. Very stupid move by my end, from my end. But now that I kind of got the whole thing going, I will be able to redo my positioning of volume correctly. So here we go. Let's do it again. And also let me make sure that we are actually cycling. Perfect. Now we are. Here we go. Way better, right? Now it's starting to sound like music. And see how quickly or how little I had to move the faders in order to get a much better sounding sweet spot. Super important. This is basically the bread and butter or the cornerstone of every single mix that you have heard that sounds great. Positioning. The understanding of the order or the, let me try to rephrase it, is the understanding of the importance and the relationship between the instruments that are part of a mix and how much of emphasis have to be or attention has to be drawn towards each of those across time, what makes a good sounding mix. And I'm not saying that this is a good sounding mix yet, but what I'm saying is that you saw how little was needed for this to sound way better than before. Because we're starting to add excitement, it's a little bit more fun to listen to, there's more things going on, and actually we can hear better what's going on. while the track is playing. Let's go back to the mixing board again. But this time around, we're going to be doing something different. We're going to be using the reference track. We're going to go back to our first plugin. And now that you know what a plugin stands for, you know what I mean. Once again, to the adapter. But in this case, we're going to be using it to confirm or to compare what we have done so far with the sound of the mix the rough mix, okay? I'm gonna press play. And just as a reminder, when this blue ball is blue, you got the blues, but also that means that we're listening to the mix. When it's orange, we're listening to the rough, the starting point. So, here we go. I think the difference is huge, don't you think? The mix that we got so far, the balance, because we haven't done anything other than finding the better positioning for our instrumentation. I think the one that we got going has more air to it, has more energy, in contrast to what the rough mix sounds like. Because the rough, you can hear that the snare is way louder than it should be. It's cloudy, it's not as exciting, it's not moving, if that makes any sense to you. I hope it does. So, now we got this thing going, this is the moment in which I will, normally speaking, save this as the starting point. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go here, we're gonna create a new version. This is gain stage, which means that if I do something very stupid further down the line while mixing or messing around with my music, I can always go back to this very starting point. Hopefully it won't happen, but it's always good to have a safety net in case something very terrible happens. That truly happens. Sometimes you change your mind, or you simply decided to have a different fruit for breakfast, and once you hit the desk, you get to the office and you get to the studio, you fire this bad boy up and you decided that it sounds like it shouldn't, and it's not necessarily because you did a bad job, it's because maybe your mood changed, and sometimes it's for the better. So we got this already. So what will be the next step? The next step would be doing something very fun that I like to do quite often, which is adding saturation and distortion. You say, that's awful. I'm an audiophile and I want the most pristine and beautiful sounding record ever. Of course you do. The thing is this. When producing music, saturation and distortion is seen as a potentially good thing. Potentially, is not necessarily always good, because it adds plenty of character to the sounds. Remember that we're going to be applying it in a controlled way on an individual basis, if we wish, and that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing it using, once again, simulation, but in this case, we're going to be using the simulation or the virtual recreation of a tape machine. Let's take a look at that. If we go over here, once again to Luna, and we move over to our mixing area, there you got it. I'm gonna simplify what we got in front of us because it's very daunting, especially for you who are not familiar with this kind of software. So what we're gonna be working with at this very point is the following. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna reduce the amount of stuff being shown to us at this stage. We don't need these many things. And just because I am removing them from our visual reach, that doesn't mean that they are bypassed or removed, okay? They are simply not visible. Okay, so we're gonna remove console as well, and we're gonna let's leave it just with tape, master tape. What is that? Is the saturation thing that we're gonna be doing, or we are gonna be applying to the instruments on an instrument by instrument basis. what we got in front of us right now, the mixer is reflective of what we got here. An example, I'm gonna select the kick, this channel, these are known as tracks, by the way. Then I'm gonna go back to the mixer environment, and look at that. We also got the kick selected. It's basically that, okay? Now, this area over here is where we're gonna be applying the saturation, we're gonna be controlling the saturation. And you can tell that all of the instruments here, all of the sounds that are part of this, the drum kit, have the same stutter A800. And you can tell that each of them have the same. Why is that? We're gonna be simulating the experience of having recorded the drum kit through that particular stutter tape machine, as if all of the channels that are part of the sound of my drum kit were recorded to that particular tape together, but as multi-channel recording. There are several different ways to record, and there are several different iterations of these tape machines. And as technology developed, more channels were added to, or the channel count increased, while the for you to record on those guys, instead of recording everything to mono or stereo, the sum, you were able to record all of the different microphones on the kit, for example, kick, snare, toms, and so on and so forth, on an individual basis. And that tape has plenty of color, saturation, and beautiful artifacts that makes anything recorded to them sound better to our human ears. That's why we're going to be using this saturation thing. And the reason why we're going to be using it is because digitally produced music is lacking that je ne sais quoi. There is something very beautiful that happens when using analog rigs, such as this one. I got some actual amplifiers here, guitar amplifiers over there, the real deal, because they sound natural. They respond to the performer, not only they not only amplify or process the signal. They are actually reactive to you, because in a way, and that's how I like to look at it, music, they react to the performance of the music. They are an extension of the musician. Okay, so let's do it. Here we go. We're gonna be first and foremost bringing the controls to set this guy. Set the sun. You got him over there, and that's the look of the stutter. Of course, it's a digital recreation using skeuomorphism to give you a visual feedback. And you got the controls for many things in this bad boy. Right now, the drums are not being affected by it. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna solo the sound of the drums so we can actually see the effects of the tape machine in action without being interrupted by the rest of the music. So the drum sounds like this as it is. They're not bad sounding. Actually, they are properly recorded. But I think we can add more color to it, more excitement. And let's do it. We're gonna be applying this guy. I'm gonna turn it on. Look at that. All of them are now affected by this guy. Let's see how it sounds like now. You see what I mean? It's getting fatter, it's getting more aggressive sounding, and it's starting to develop some character. But we haven't touched anything on the tape machine. This is just a default setting. What if we try something different? This is where the presets kick in. Here we got a series of presets, all of them labeled, inspired by a particular sound. For example, you got here hard rock. If I click on it, you see that everything changed on the controls here. That's what a preset stands for. So let's see if it sounds better. sounds punchy, right? It's way more exciting and more aggressive sounding. Do I like it? Yeah, I like it, but we can play around a little bit with it. Look, we can change here the kind of the tape style that we're rocking. Each of them have a completely different flavor. We're right now using GPS, but we can also change the width, the IPS of the tape. Let's see how it sounds like, and I can do that real time. Let's do it. Right now, the ones that I liked were 20 and 7.5. 15 had a little bit of a nose on the mid-range that I didn't like, while 20, it's adding, or 30, it's adding more punch, it's a little bit more aggressive sounding, and 75 or 7.5, it's adding a little bit of more, how can I put it, beefiness to the sound. The low end, the kick drum sounds a little bit more ballsy. Yeah, proper terminology. Let's see. How to decide? Well, you never do that, and this is a very important piece of advice. You never mix in solo. Why? Solo means just one instrument or one track at a time, or as we are doing right now, a series of tracks at a time. But it's called mixing for a reason. You are mixing all of the different elements that are part of your song together so you can sum them up in a beautiful, cohesive, and coherent fashion. If you solo stuff and you apply all sorts of effects and you start to manipulate your sound or your track in solo, chances are that as soon as you bring back the rest of the mix, it won't work. So you're gonna just be chasing your tail. So that's why you should never mix in solo. You use solo. We just used it. But I never recommend you to mix in solo. Now, let's go back. Let's add some flair, but in context of the mix. I'm gonna turn off this guy. No effect or no saturation being applied to the different sounds of my drum kit whatsoever, as it is right now. But now that we remove the solo, we're gonna play back the entirety of the track, and I'm gonna bring in the sound of the tape saturation to see how good it sounds. Here we go. How that? Sounds better, right? We added excitement, we added punch, but you saw that I automatically went towards my board and lowered the sound of the kick. It was a little bit too loud to my taste. Because now that we got this extra beefiness coming out of our saturation, we got a little bit of a more perceived loudness coming out of the kick drum. Tell me on your end if you managed to catch that. I didn't like it necessarily speaking, but I like what it's doing to the rest. Now, we can do more. If I open the back of the tape recorder, we are able now to control the input and the output, which means that we can add more signal coming in, making the tape saturate even further or reaching that saturation spot easier and faster. Let's try it. I'm gonna once again solo my drums just for you to have an idea or listen to it by its own, and then we're gonna be pushing this guy in. And right now you can tell that it's linked. This linked means that if I push or add more saturation, increase the input, we're gonna lower the output in the same increment or in the same basis, giving us kind of a balanced and always close to unity gain. Unity gain stands for flat. As it came in, it came out, volume-wise. But allowing us to be able to notice any form of difference or artifacts being applied to the sound without being fooled by loudness, because this is very important. When you are listening to music, and don't tell me that you don't do this. You're rocking, I don't know, like freaking Bon Jovi, and you're listening obviously to Living on a Prayer, and that's your jam. As soon as the first chorus is about to hit, you go there and crank that bad boy up. Why? Because it feels better. And even gives you more excitement, right? And also, in a way, you think that the music sounds better the louder it is. And this is why it's very important, and it's something to keep into consideration when critically analyzing music, not only mixing. When something is louder, our brain automatically thinks that it's better sounding. That's why in the channel, when we're doing those exercises analyzing music, I always stress how important it is for the dynamic range to be respected in the production of an album. Because it's very easy for you to be fooled by a loud record into thinking that it's actually a good sounding record. Okay, with that out of the way, let's work with this. We're going to be applying the gain. It's less terrible than I thought, because I was hoping for a mess. Because I pushed it to its limits, and we're already starting to hear a little bit of extra kind of dark, kind of fuzzy sounding sound that's normal for something like this, or by doing something like this, because you're actually increasing the amount of harmonics. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. In simple terms, it sounds better, but there is always too much of a good thing. And in this case, it's not that terrible, but listen to the low end and listen to the kick drum in particular. It's kind of floppy, right? It's not as attack driven, and it's not as punchy as it was before. It has a bit more of rumbliness to it, and I don't like it. So let's address it. I will dial this back somewhere there. But also, I gotta tell you that I like what it's doing to the sound of my overheads. It's making the ambience of the room feel more exciting. And talking about the drums, something that I should have told you before at the beginning of this. Right now we're dealing with an arrangement following, or a recording following the following. The kick drum is just the microphone recording the kick drum. The snare is the microphone recording the snare. The toms, the same. But we got overheads. Those are the microphones that you usually see on top of the kit in the recording studio. Then overhead mono is usually a microphone. I like to put it behind the drummer and usually facing towards the snare, because it gives even more punch. It's not necessarily a technique that works every time, but when it works, it's beautiful. Then we got room stereo, which is actually capturing. Those are microphones that are usually far away from the drum kit. And those are capturing and recording the sound of the ambience of the room. Okay? Of course, the goddamn tambourine, which is always welcome. Now, going back to this. I don't like what the saturation was doing to the sound of the kick. It was making it less aggressive. Let's bring back the rest of the mix, and we're going to be finding the sweet spot for the gain of the entirety of the drums. I like that, but we lost that excitement that I was talking about. But luckily, we got actually manual control for the control of the saturation that is applied to each of the individual elements of the drum kit. So I'm going to be applying more saturation, for example, to the overheads. This guy, the room stereo first, the room. Badass, That's right. As soon as I pushed that in, we got even more energy, more excitement, and again, we're just applying saturation and distortion. Some people could refer to this as color, which makes sense, and it's something that, as an audiophile, you might be looking for when trying to buy, for example, a good amplifier or a good preamp for your headphones, because those are actually built in a way that produce this extra layer of color and texture, which makes your experience sound, or your experience listening to music be better. In this case, we're using it in a completely different fashion. We're using it to make the sound of our instruments that are part of our mix feel better sounding and fit together better. Nice. Now, let's go back to this. And I think we can also get away with a little bit more of this saturation, applying it to the rest of the indirect microphones, which are the ones that are not on top of the kit, which are the room, as I explained before, the overhead in the stereo, and those are the ones. So let's apply it to the mono overhead. Nice, it's working. But now that we did this, I truly need to rearrange my mix once again, volume-wise. Because now we got more energy, more detail, more punchiness coming out of the drum kit, that our starting point is no longer as good as it was before. But don't get me wrong, it's just a matter of pushing faders a little bit more. That's why I gave myself headroom. Okay, so let's do it. We're talking about tiny increments in volume, so let's do it. Here we go. I think we got a good starting point. Now we're basically at the end of this live stream, so this is something I always like to do. And by the way, I should have mentioned before, I have another channel in which I go full hands-on into these things, and I go very technical in that one. So if you want to learn, or you're already learning your way around music production, feel free to take a look at that channel. I'm gonna add the link. I'm gonna add the link to the description. I'm gonna add the link in the description of this live stream once this live stream is over, so you can take a look at the channel as well. So, coming back to what I was saying, something I always like to do when we're having this, when I'm making these videos or live streams, when we reach this stage, I like to do a comparison point between what we got by the end of the session with what we started with. And let's do it. Here we go. That's why we're gonna come back to our plugin, the adapter Matrix AV, and we're gonna be using it once again to listen to both my mix and the starting point, the rough mix. Let me make sure that we don't have the the cycle region shouldn't be there, and also let's play from the very beginning of the track. Here we go. And let me bring back Matrix AV. And as a reminder, when it's blue, we're listening to our mix. When it's orange, we're listening to the starting point. So let's do it. Here we go. So what do you think? I think the difference is already quite staggering, because the rough mix, we thought it sounded better, right? Or it sounded okay. But now that we did just these little adjustments, we can see that the rough mix is way too heavy on the mid-range. It has plenty of this nasal kind of thing to it that it's very much annoying. I didn't like it. It even made me feel like I got something stuck on my nose. I know, gross, sorry, but you get me. It was very annoying. Secondly, it's kind of flat sounding. No excitement, no movement. We didn't get this kind of feeling of the song actually developing or moving forwards. We truly got a huge change in excitement, as I said before, but also the dynamics feel more present. Also, I could hear the bass on the mix. I could tell that there are more things in motion when it comes to the bass playing, now that we got a much better balance between the instrumentation. See how little we have done today, but we got such a huge push forward when it comes to the end result. I hope this made sense to you. Again, this is the first time we do it in this channel. I've been pondering with this idea for a good while now, but I never truly found a way to do it in a way that would be good for you. Because one thing is explaining this to somebody who is already aware of the terminology, and it's kind of a, well, I'm gonna say it as it is. People who, as myself, I look at myself as a nerd because I truly pay attention to many things that I shouldn't. And it requires this kind of mentality when it comes to mixing music for you to truly appreciate or for you to truly get into it. Not appreciation, because appreciation is something completely different. And somebody who enjoys music, who is a fan of music, looks at it from the perspective of somebody who will appreciate the final product. And that means that there is no previous knowledge of or not necessarily speaking, there is no need for him to know what happened before. But I also know that if you start to understand why or why the sound of music that you love so much sounds the way it does, you can expand the appreciation for that piece of music even further, or that recording for that matter, because both of them are very much hand in hand. They're very close together. So hopefully this made sense. As I said before, this is the first installment in the series because I will like to take you through all of the different stages of this mixing session. Don't know if I'm going to mix the full track on this channel because, I don't know, we will have to go to very technical territory if we truly want to mix it. And I don't think is the right fit for this. But I will show you the techniques involved in the sound, and I will explain, even with my whiteboard, I have it here. I simply didn't use it today because I didn't see the need. But I will truly like to show you all of those instruments being used because we even got the rack, and actually it was being used the entirety of the time. I didn't show you because I didn't want to add more complications to this already complex matter. But we will see, and time will tell us what we should be doing in the next installment. Also, if you're watching this, you managed to reach the end, well, don't be cheap. Subscribe, or at least leave a like, because, well, I've been talking for an hour and showing you many things, so at least be gentle. It's just a joke, but feel free to do it if you consider this to be worth of your like. And also, subscribe. And feel free to leave any question that you might like to ask me now that I'm about to finish this live stream, so I can address it next week. I will keep track of the comments. So, with that being said, thank you for joining, thank you for watching, and as every single time that I meet you, I gotta remind you that you should never let anybody tell you what to dream about, and remember that I will see you when I see you.